Storm chasing is a rapidly growing hobby. With 2025's insane tornado season, including an EF5 that hit near Enderlin, North Dakota on June 20th, storm chasing interest has exploded. And with the release of the Twister sequel, interest in storm chasing hasn't been this high in over a decade. But a lot of aspiring chasers watch the action from the sidelines. They live vicariously through live streamers. Perhaps for a few of them, it's because they can't afford to chase. But regrettably, in other cases, they simply don't know where to start. So today, I'm telling the story of how I became a storm chaser. My hope is that it will inspire people to get into the game. You can think of this as a kind of how I built this for storm chasers. I am meteorologist and storm chaser Gabe Garfield, and I've been tracking storms for over 25 years. I've tracked over 200 tornadoes, including 7 EF4s and 2 EF5s. Becoming a capable storm chaser isn't easy. So I teach aspiring chasers to master tornado forecasting, select the best targets, and navigate safely around the storm, empowering them to chase with confidence. All right, let's get into it. Have you ever begged your parents for a movie rental? That's exactly how Twister hooked me. I grew up in the era of the first one, and that movie was amazing. When it came out on videotape, I absolutely begged my parents to rent it for me. In fact, I was so obsessed with it that I faked sickness so that I could rewatch it over and over again. It taught me that you don't have to wait for tornadoes to come to you, like I was accustomed to being in Oklahoma. You could actually go to the tornadoes and chase them. That was pretty amazing. I wanted to see a tornado so badly. There was only one tiny problem. I couldn't drive. And so I asked my dad to take me. Then on June 8th, 1998, my opportunity came. A powerful supercell thunderstorm formed about 20 miles southwest of my hometown, Norman, Oklahoma. So, of course, I convinced my dad to take me chasing. And the only thing we knew about chasing at that time was that to see a tornado, you had to go to the southwest side of the storm. We were so green. Near the town of Chickasha, we found a massive rotating wall cloud. And instead of chasing it chased us up Highway 62. We had zero idea how to position. In fact, the wall cloud spun over the top of us. Then, as we entered Norman, baseball-sized hail began to fall, and so we called off our chase. The storm ended up going into eastern Oklahoma and producing 6 tornadoes, including some strong ones. I can't believe we didn't follow it. We were incredibly clueless. In fact, we were probably in a little bit of danger just not knowing what we were doing. Then fast forward to 1999, and that season actually started out pretty quiet. In fact, eerily quiet. In fact, I remember some of my high school friends asking me about the lack of tornadoes. Why weren't there any tornadoes in Oklahoma? It's May after all. Then came May 3rd, the biggest outbreak in Oklahoma history. Honestly, I had zero clue about the severe weather that day. In fact, I ditched my high school class that afternoon and went on foot all the way to the National Weather Service. True story. Ironically, the high risk that was issued that day at the Storm Prediction Center happened right across the street from where I was at that moment. The air was very thick that day. I remember how muggy it was. I call it tornado air. If you've grown up in the plains, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's very thick. Maybe there's a little overcast, but it feels warm. You just knew something was going on that day. Then I got back home and television meteorologist Mike Morgan was on talking about the high risk and the potential for strong to violent tornadoes. And he mentioned something that I'll never forget. He said that the conditions were golden for violent tornadoes that day. And that certainly got my attention. Not long after that, maybe a half an hour, the first supercell went up in southwestern Oklahoma near the town of Cache, just west of Lawton, and it grew explosively and started producing tornadoes within 45 minutes. It was incredible, very fast organization. And then shortly after that, it started just producing wedge after wedge, including a mile-wide F5 that ended up hitting the towns of Bridge Creek and eventually more. Seeing that all come together, I thought this was a grand opportunity. If 1998 was awesome, this was even more awesome. There was a big wedge out there. I wanted to see it, so I begged my dad to take me chasing. But sadly for me, probably good for my family to be honest, my dad was worried that the tornado was going to come into Norman, and so He wanted to be with my family if that happens. And so we didn't go chasing after that tornado. In fact, we sheltered at the student union at the University of Oklahoma, and I watched on TV as this absolutely massive tornado destroyed more. Heading home that evening, I just remember looking to the east and seeing this absolutely explosive updraft just past Sarkey's Energy Center, if you're familiar with the OU campus. And it was just like an atomic bomb had gone off. And that was the updraft that would eventually become a supercell that moved on into Stroud, Oklahoma, and Northeast Oklahoma, and hit the Tanger Outlet Center as a half-mile wide F3 tornado. Obviously, that was a very devastating situation, but as a kid, I was just thinking I wanted to be out there chasing. I wasn't thinking about the destruction that happened that night, and I was pretty bummed by missing the tornado. And I think my dad knew that. I didn't really vocalize that. And so he offered to take me out kind of pseudo chasing after that. And so we went out to go after Storm B, if you're familiar with the May 3rd outbreak. And we ended up near I-44, actually not too far south of the F5 track, where it went just near Newcastle. And I remember seeing the low precipitation supercell updraft to the west, and we couldn't quite see the tornado near Minco, but the updrafts were absolutely explosive that day. In any case, of course, I actually missed out, and so I was still pretty bummed. And so my dad offered to take me storm chasing again, this time with a tornado certificate. So he drew me this little certificate and presented it to me. I think it was on my birthday that year, and said, hey, this is redeemable for one free storm chase. We'll make this up to you. And of course, I was going to redeem that mug. I was not going to let him off the hook. So next year, 2000, on March 7th, I redeemed it, and it was a moderate risk day, Western Oklahoma, maybe Southwestern Oklahoma. And we headed that way, didn't have a single clue of what we were doing, just followed a media vehicle that was going like 80 down the road and thought they knew where they were going. He liked to drive slowly, and he let them go. And so we were pretty much flying blind that day. And it was pretty much a squall line for the most part, but we actually had tornadoes that kind of formed around us. And we had, again, zero clue. So we obviously didn't have success that day, but the thing was, I was hooked on storm chasing. I loved the thrill, I loved the hunt and the excitement. And we tried chasing again. It was much easier to get my dad to go. Maybe it was a bonding experience with my dad. And so we went out quite a bit more often. And did we have success? We did not. It was actually pretty terrible for the most part. We were close to tornadoes, but we didn't quite see anything. In fact, I remember one that actually we weren't close to anything on, to be honest with you, where we had literally picked the worst target in the Southern Plains. The risk was across Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas, and we picked Western Oklahoma, and the tornadoes happened in Southern Kansas and North Texas. So we were monkey in the middle on that one. Really no good at all. Then the big day finally came, September 18th, 2002. I'll never forget that day. That was an incredible day. After 3 years of busting, being close to tornadoes on multiple occasions and not seeing them, we finally saw a tornado near Blackwell, Oklahoma. Now, mind you, it was not impressive. It was just basically this little dust whirl under a little truncated cone funnel. It was embedded in a squall line, but it was a tornado. It was a tornado that I saw. It was like, they exist. And so I was thrilled that the monkey was finally off my back, that I'd finally notched a mark in the bedpost, and people would stop talking about how terrible I was at storm chasing. Because, by the way, they did say that they called it the Gabe factor, and the Gabe factor was done. So I was really excited. Gradually, things got a little bit better. So 2003 came, we saw some tornadoes on March 17th in Southwest Oklahoma. Not a great intercept, but we did okay. And then really our big day was May 4th that year. That was a big high-risk outbreak in eastern Kansas and western Missouri. And we ended up seeing a killer tornado that hit Pierce City, Missouri, and it was about a half-mile wide, just this big egg beater type tornado. But we were starting to hit our mark in 2003, and then 2004 was even better. Probably one of the most epic tornado seasons of all time in the plains, at least while I've been chasing. And we saw tornadoes near Attica, Kansas on May 12th. We didn't have a great intercept there, but we saw that set of tornadoes. And then May 22nd was a big day in southeast Nebraska. We saw the Hallam Wedge, the infamous Hallam Wedge, 2.5 mile wide tornado. It was the world record holder for tornado width, actually, for a number of years until it was overtaken by the El Reno tornado in 2013. But we saw that tornado, and then we ended up seeing some more tornadoes on May 29th and then June 12th with the Mulvane, Kansas, beautiful cone white tornado, just absolutely photogenic, probably the most photogenic tornado I've ever seen. And so by the end of 2004, I thought I was a pretty good storm chaser. But as you can imagine, the atmosphere has a way of humbling you, and it certainly humbled me. 2005 and 2006 came, and I saw not much of anything, and it wasn't for lack of trying. We just weren't very good. So all that confidence we had built up in 2003 and 2004 completely crashed in 05 and 06. Now, that was because, in large part, we just didn't have a lot of tornadoes that season, but it was certainly the humbling that I needed. So after the busts of 2005 and 2006, and a particularly painful bust in April of 2007, where there were tornadoes all around us, and we saw nothing, I began to think I needed to change my habits around forecasting. I had relied on SPC too much, and I needed to get better. And so I started to look for subtle patterns in the surface data, in the upper air, and began to develop a kind of pattern recognition that comes with chasing a lot. Now, we still busted, but over time, the number of busts decreased relative to everyone else. Even so, I wasted a lot of time and money and opportunities because I didn't know enough. And so that's why I'm creating these videos, because I want to share with everyone the lessons that I've learned. By the way, if you're interested in accelerating your learning about storm chasing, I've created an online chasing course called the Tornado Chaser Transformation. It's about 6 hours, it's self-paced, teaches you about how to read weather charts, has my forecasting process in there, all the goodies about positioning, how to stay safe, etc. It's all in there. So if you're interested, check it out in the link below. And I think that's about it. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing. That would mean the world to me. We're going to share more chasing tips and stories, so look out for what comes next. Thanks.